So I'll begin by introducing myself. My name is Annie Browning, and I'm a therapist here at Meru Health. And my focus is on spirituality and psychology, specifically around consciousness theory and energy theory, and how that can provide meaning and hope and purpose for us all. For those of you who are joining outside of our team, Meru Health is an online mental health provider that uses a mind-body approach to help people that are experiencing depression, anxiety, and burnout. Meru Talks is an educational forum where we bring in researchers and other experts from different fields to talk about their specialty. This time, we are honored to have Amy Weintraub join us. She is the founder of Life Force Yoga and the author of Yoga for Depression, Yoga Skills for Therapists, and numerous other articles and book chapters. She has been a consultant for research on the impact of yoga on mood, and the evidence-based yoga protocols for depression and anxiety she developed are used in healthcare settings globally and featured on award-winning audiovisual products for mood management. Her new card deck, Yoga for Your Mood, 52 Ways to Shift Depression and Anxiety, has just been released. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much, Annie. And Annie and I spoke a few minutes before, and what a wonderful host we have. Someone who's a therapist and a yoga practitioner who really gets the efficacy of integrating yoga practices, not asana, not pretzel poses, but simple practices into treatment. And so I'd love to just go over a few basic things. So as we know from Stephen Porges's work and from Deb Dana, we've learned how much the body speaks to the mind. 80% of the times that we are aware of something in our mind, it's already come into consciousness in our bodies. And that's why using the body, starting with the body, is so important, especially in any kind of treatment. That body-centered addressing of mood can be the key to really understanding and shifting mood. So that's why integrating physical practices, yoga in particular, things that are appropriate in a clinical setting can really make a difference. So one of the ways in which we know that yoga works so well is that because we know that gentle movement, this is based on research, and slow, deep breathing actually calms the central nervous system and begins a little bit of stimulation of the ventral vagal, that social engagement, that sense of all is calm and soothed, I am content, I belong here, those feelings of basic feeling of just being present. And when we activate the system through more rapid breathing, some of you may practice Kundalini, something like where there's more active, repetitive movement in yoga, we are stimulating the sympathetic nervous system in a good way and increasing heart rate variability, the ability to move from sympathetic to parasympathetic in a healthy way. And what's really interesting, and one of the points I want to make here, is that when we stimulate the system, and we'll be doing some practices to do that, it's really important then to ground, to come back, to do like a mini body scan. And we'll be practicing that so that we're not leaving someone in a more agitated state. And we'll be doing that, and I think that you'll experience it and know what in your body and know then what I'm really talking about. So I'd like to give just a basic overview. There's plenty of research out there. When I wrote Yoga for Depression, there were three main studies. Shirley Tellis, who's now got over 250 studies on PubMed, and a couple of an old study from the 70s in France, and Bernardo Luciano, who is just an amazing researcher in Italy. Those were it. And now there's like every week there are more studies on the efficacy of integrating yoga for optimum mental health. So we know that there's a decrease in the cortisol levels, the stress hormone, fight or flight, and an increase in GABA levels. And when we're depressed, when we're anxious, when we've had a history of trauma, those GABA levels are low. So an increase in GABA is an indicator of the effectiveness of yoga. We're also doing things like oxytocin and prolactin, elevating those hormones, those feel-good hormones. That's why if you practice yoga, you feel like you want to hug somebody. So you can't do it online, but that feeling of those feel-good hormones are elevated. There's the increase in heart rate variability and many other more like neuroplasticity is increased. So, for example, telomeres, it's been shown, our telomeres lengthen, which keeps our brains young. And for those of us over a certain age, that's really important. So, and what I love the most is, especially when we're dealing with folks with a trauma history, you know that when there's trauma and that the amygdala often enlarges, and that's why we become more hypervigilant, more hyper aroused. We're at a little bit more reactive because that amygdala gets triggered because of the earlier trauma. And the hippocampus, which is responsible for our linear memories, our coherent memories, shrinks because when we've been traumatized, the memories are incoherent often. So the beauty of yoga practice is that it actually has been shown to reverse that, so that the amygdala begins to shrink and the hippocampus enlarges, which I think is one of the most exciting things about what we found in yoga. So beyond, no matter what style of yoga is practiced, there is something that is true to all styles of yoga. It's the basic yoga philosophy that our true nature is not depressed. And what these simple, accessible practices, 2 to 3 minutes, that are easily adapted into treatment, what they can do is clear the window, clear the constrictions in the physical body, in the emotional body, in the mental body, even if it's just for a moment. The client then is not attached to the story. We're in a level of connection that is beneath the story, beneath the mood. And that window with consistent practice begins to open wider. So there's a greater sense of self-regulation and agency, because the client then, for example, can do a practice that you share with them. So that creates that sort of love in the room that we know is really the most effective aspect of treatment. But it creates that therapeutic alliance when you do a practice together. And the cards that this is just the new cards make this really simple, because there are 52 accessible practices that are appropriate in any kind of setting, at home, in a clinical setting. So that's what we're doing. We're offering that gift to clients, that they are so much more than whatever mood has been visiting. We are also giving them a sense of embodiment in a way that feels safe, because so many folks, as you know, are living from the neck up. And when we can give our clients that sense of being safely embodied through, you'll see how we do it as we move into practices. I'm going to stop my screen share now.
All right, thank you, Amy. So I hear so many parallels with our work at Meru, from the use of HRVB with our participants to this idea of holding a psychological safety with our participants as well as they walk through the 12 weeks together, and wholeheartedly affirm this ideology that we are here to awaken from the illusion of our separation from one another. And this ability to be in this alliance through opportunities like yoga to build that collective state together, which is transformational and healing. So thank you for that overarching view and how it parallels not just our research, but also our methods so well. So maybe I'll start with a question, and I want to mention that if anyone has a question along the way, I think Mayu posted this, but you're welcome to put it into the Q&A and we'll weave it in as we have a conversation. So I wonder if I could start with asking a little bit more about how you view yoga, not just a series of asanas that may help us become more flexible, but shedding some light on how yoga affects us physically and mentally. And you've certainly pointed to some of the research, but specifically, how does yoga differ from, let's say, other forms of exercise that might, create that endorphin experience or other sorts of similar effects, even
Yes.
physiologically?
Yes, I mean, I'm an exercise devotee, so I also enjoy other forms of exercise. However, for example, when the mood is lethargic or there's a depression is visiting, we are not likely to get up and take a run or hop on a bike. So yoga can meet us where we are. We can even start with a practice in a supine position in bed, something like a stair step breath in bed, movements, gentle movements, rocking back and forth, bringing the knees to the chest, something that meets us where we are. And by the same token, if we're extremely agitated, we can bring that agitation into a focus by meeting that agitation. So it also, because of the emphasis on the breath, and Holger Kramer, who's done a lot of research, over 100 studies, and he and I wrote a chapter together in Yoga for Mental Health, a clinical book. His survey of research and his own research has shown that the breathing practices are the most effective practices for mood management. So yes, we're getting endorphins. I certainly do. And I'm riding my bike or taking a hike in nature. There's nothing like, I even practice yoga in nature. I do standing practices in nature. And the breathing practices are accessible to everyone, which in fact, in Life Force Yoga, which is the training that I founded, we actually don't talk so much about the breath as we use imagery, because some people have had an experience, whether it's because of physiological asthma or some other kind of respiratory issues, or because they've been in a yoga class and the first thing the teacher has said is, let's watch the breath. And what happens sometimes is that that can make someone who's feeling agitated even more agitated, or take a deep breath. So we use things like, which we'll talk about, stair step breath, which takes little, that uses imagery, little steps up a mountain through the nostrils, that sort of leaps over that, I don't want to breathe, don't teach me to breathe, I can't do it. There are ways in which we invite everyone, that we make it so accessible and inclusive that anyone, even someone who feels that they've had not such good experiences in some kind of breathing exercise class, or that they can feel successful. So I would say it's the breath, to answer, go back to your original question, and that you can meet the mood with the practice.
So lovely response. And I hear the kind of these themes again of accepting where we are, which is always so key to movement and change. The accessibility of yoga for so many different people and populations, and the ability to weave it into sort of everyday life instead of these set apart times of I need to go somewhere, I need to do something, I need to join a particular community in order to access these practices.
Oh, you're so right. You know, the what we do with the practices in the card deck is that they're 2 to 3 minute interventions that we can do for ourselves. So many of us are spending way too much time in front of our computers. And to just say, okay, I need to like set the timer, tell Alexa to set the timer and get up out of your chair, take a card, do a 2 minute practice, sit back down refreshed. Yeah. So it doesn't even, I mean, forget about mood, just not getting up enough. And in fact, there's a new study that I just saw that the more hours we spend in front of the computer, the more likely we are to be depressed.
Yeah, and it certainly speaks to that sense of also being disembodied because we're so much in our heads all the time when we're in front of our computers as well.
Yeah.
So another question, you again touched on this a bit, especially with breath practice, but what are the benefits? It's even some concrete benefits of yoga for people who are experiencing clinical depression or anxiety.
I think that the benefits are that you have more control. What studies have shown that when we feel a sense of agency, when we feel more control over our lives, a sense of like, I can manage my life, when we have that sense that we are, or that depression is not ameliorated, but we the well-being, that sense of well-being is elevated. And if you can learn something really simple that meets you where you are and then moves you into balance, then you have more, you control your life. So you don't have to, in the middle of the week, have a panic attack and look for someone to help you. You have tools that you can use to manage your life. With depression, I mean, from my own experience, I had been on medication for many years, did psychotherapy for many years, and I think it's a beautiful marriage of psychotherapy and yoga, because there have been times when I've gone back into therapy throughout my yoga career. But it wasn't until I began a
Okay, we're back,
all
Amy.
right. I am so sorry. That's never happened to me before. The Apple just shut me down. So
We're back.
we're
Amy,
back.
I attempted to answer a few questions.
Good. I'm sure you did a beautiful job.
Oh, I wouldn't say that, but we're glad you're here.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll start back up with what you were saying. I think we were talking about depression and anxiety and specifically different yoga practices that might speak directly to those
Well,
experiences.
the interesting thing is, and it's not fully understood, that if we try to manage the mood by telling someone to take a deep breath when they're feeling anxious, that's probably only going to further agitate. So what we need to do is to meet that agitation with a practice, simple. When it feels met and understood, then we move to something that brings us into balance. So if we're feeling depressed and we're like a couch potato and we can't get off the couch to, to change the channel when the remote dies, there's no way we're going to do an energizing practice, something that's going to lift the mood right away. So we need to meet that slower mood and with a practice, and then add something that brings us into balance. And that's the way we do it in Life Force Yoga. It's also the way the card deck is designed. So you can, if you are feeling agitated, you pick a card that meets that, a red card, and then you pick a blue card that brings you into balance.
And this parallels one question that was asked by someone else already, but when we lost you, about whether there's specific times of day that are encouraged for practice. And also, I'll add one more question. Sometimes participants or those we work with are not even quite sure what their mood is. It's difficult for them to articulate it. I'm curious if you have any concrete suggestions on what card they might choose.
That's a great question, that second question, because often we have both anxiety and depression. My particular situation when I was depressed was an anxiety-based depression. So the mind may be really active and the body's feeling lethargic. So I always say start with the body because of that 80% between that vagal highway through the vagus nerve. 80% of our responses come first through the body and they affect the mind. So start with the body. So even if your mind is really clicking away and you're feeling very agitated, if the body is feeling lethargic, you don't want to move, start there. And the first part of the question, was, can you repeat that, please?
I stacked my questions. So let's go back. It's simply around time of day to practice. And one of our yoga therapists actually chatted in and said, it's any time that you are likely most motivated to just engage. So it doesn't have to be these perfect times, but maybe you have something else to offer.
Yeah, no, I will do a simple practice, like a 2 or 3 minute mood shifter at any time of the day. The only thing I would say is that you want to do more active practices in the morning. It just makes sense because you've got your whole day ahead of you. And in the evening, if you do choose to practice, you're doing something that's calming and soothing that allows you to find your way into sleep. Yeah. So left nostril breathing, for example, in terms of left to right is very soothing and calming, and doing those kinds of practices that are going to help with your sleep.
Beautiful. So Amy, I'm wondering at this point if we want to pause. I do see some more questions, so I will attend to those. We want to make sure we have time to practice together. So maybe for the next 15 minutes, we could take some time to practice, and then we'll return to some questions.
There we go. So I really want to thank Juliet Percival. Her drawings are amazing, the illustrations. So this is pulling energy. So what this does is it can meet an agitated state, which is why that a close with at the end of the card is so important, because it brings it into the body and it grounds it. So I'm going to invite you to get out of your seat. And I'm going to get out of my seat. You won't be able to see all of me, but you can see the knees. I'm going to just show you my knees. My knees are soft when I do this. I'm sort of a little bouncy. So it's very simple. It's just simply, and this can be done in an office when somebody's really revved up. Let's just get up and try this before we sit down. So inhaling and exhaling through the nostrils, you're pulling energy. And if shoulders are an issue and arms don't want to go overhead, you can go forward and back. For 3, 2, 1. Now here's the important part. Allow the eyes to soften or close and sense the energy awake, perhaps in your palms, left palm, right palm. Sense perhaps tingling in the left arm, the right arm. The body is always present. The mind is a time traveler. So when you can bring your awareness to that sensation in your palms, you are the presence you seek. A window through whatever mood is visiting. Inhale from feet to crown, I am. Exhale to your feet, here, grounded, ready. And then allow your eyes to flutter open. Just take a moment to feel how much more room there is inside for you. Maybe a shift. So if you've been doing, if you're using this to meet anxiety, you're grounding that hyper aroused energy and bringing it home to the body, to the feet. You're grounding it. And that is, so that's why that second part is equally as important as the first part. And if you noticed my language, it may be that Annie addressed this while I was off camera, but you know, it's a language of invitation rather than I want you to close your eyes, which is fine. It's the way most of us speak ordinarily, or I'd like you to close your eyes. But that's kind, if you can shift away from that to a language of invitation, allow your eyes to soften or close. And then in terms of opening, allow your eyes to flutter open, or when you're ready, you can allow your eyes to open, giving people options of looking, if their eyes, if they're not comfortable closing their eyes, a soft focused gaze. So there's ways in which you can really make people feel that there's no way they can do this wrong. And so shall I move on, or do you have a question about that practice? I'll move on then. Okay, so let's assume that you're sitting now, and let's assume it's a therapy session. You don't have to. I've been doing on my Instagram page every day, 1 card a day live at Amy Life Force Yoga on my Instagram page. So this is stair-step breath to meet anxiety or panic. So often when we have that revved up breath and we're feeling panicky, we need to meet it. So this is, and we're using the language, not so much of breath. I'm not saying like take 4 or 6 little breaths in a little inhalation. So we're not using that because that can be intimidating for some people. So we're saying, perhaps, and we'll do this, maybe think of something, first of all, that feels soothing and calming, an image in your heart's mind. And if an image doesn't readily arise, then maybe a word like peace. So we're going to take little steps as though you're climbing a mountain through the nostrils. And the arms aren't necessarily raised. In fact, they aren't. That's just that little thought bubble that that fellow has when he's seeing himself as, you know, with agency, empowered. So take little breaths with your own image, and it can change. The image can change. We'll do it maybe 3 times. Little steps through the nostrils. at your own pace. And when you get to the top, see the image or the word, and then slide down through the nostrils. And again, little steps as though you're climbing a mountain through the nostrils. And again, let this be at your own pace. And when you get to the top, look out, see something beautiful, slide down the mountain. And one more time. And when you get to the top, look out, see something beautiful or a word, and then slide down the mountain. And allow your natural breath to find you again. And when you're ready, allow your eyes to flutter open. So you can see that we've met that slightly rapid breath and we've brought it home. And there's usually, when we do that, more breath. There is another practice that we can do that meets depression, that also uses those little steps. It's taking a long breath up and little steps down, which gently pumps the belly, which is wonderful for depression. We don't want to use strong practices like Kapalabhati, skull shining breath, in a clinical setting because they can be too over the top, too overpowering, or breath of, we want to be really sensitive to keeping things in balance. So I'm going to move on, unless there's a question and Annie wants to stop me. I'm going to move on to the next practice. I love this one. So I'm going to scoot back a little bit so you can see it. So it uses a mantra, and in all of these mantras are not associated with deities, so they're fine for any faith person, any person of any faith to practice, any constitution. So this one is to the heart. We're going to use Eagle Mudra, right hand on the heart, and just touching the heart with the hand, as you probably know, stimulates ventral vagal activity. So that beautiful social engagement that we seek. And left hand on top, linking the thumbs. That's Eagle Mudra. Now, I'm going to invite you to inhale your arms out. And this time, see something beautiful, maybe the same image, a calming image, or an image for clarity, whatever, or a word like peace, or if you're seeking more clarity in your life, clarity, whatever it is. It could be courage, okay, that you're bringing to your heart. We're going to use the mantra So Hum, which means I am that. So we'll be breathing out, we'll be breathing in as we bring the arms out for 4 counts, and then So Hum to the heart, okay? And if you don't like to use the sound, just think it in your heart's mind. So inhale your arms out. See that image or a word that's soothing. So hum. Hands come back to the heart. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Embrace that image or word. So hum. And one more time. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Embrace that image, not separate. So hum. I am that. Give your heart a little rock. The image that you've chosen or the word that you've chosen on the altar of your heart, there whenever you need it. And then as you're ready, allow the hands to float down and the eyes to flutter open. So that can be a way to end a session if you're in a clinical practice. It can be a way to interrupt, as a kind of intervention. And it can be used with, an image for courage, for strength, for clarity, for peace. So whatever is needed, I am that. And the final practice I have up here is calm strength. So we're going to do something very similar, only we're going to bring the hands to the solar plexus. In yoga, we think of the Manipura chakra. The solar plexus is a seat of self-esteem, power, identity. So it will bring the hands to that power center, the power battery. So this time, maybe bring an image for calm strength into your heart, or courage. And if an image, again, doesn't readily arise, maybe the essence or the word calm strength, and the image can change. The image can change. It doesn't have to stay the same. So we're going to inhale, 2, 3, 4. We're going to use Mahara, sorry. Mahara. Drawing the image to the belly. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Calm strength. Mahara. And one more time. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Embracing that calm strength. Mahara. And then bring that image or word to your heart. Strength to the heart, there whenever you need it. Calm strength, courage. You are that. And then if your eyes are closed, allow them to flutter open. So simple, probably less than 2 minutes each practices. I'm going to stop the screen share now, and we'll be back to answer questions, to talk. So Annie, is there any question from you or any of the folks who've joined us?
Sure. So first of all, thank you. Thank you, Amy. And for those of us that were engaging in that practice, you might also notice your own shifts in mood just from doing those simple practices. There were a few questions that were more technical in nature about where to find your cards. I answered that. Just a couple detail pieces. So those questions have been answered. At this point, if there are any questions and you would prefer to be unmuted, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you, where you verbally can ask Amy a question. And one question that I'll ask just to get us started is, so often I experience it from participants and just the general world right now, this prevalent feeling of overwhelm because of the volume of what we're digesting via information, or even a volume, an emotional overload. And so if there was one practice, just even one asana to start with, what would you say might be a go-to? Especially knowing that people might say, there's just too much. How do I pick where to start?
Yeah. Oh, well, I would actually start with the breath, because that clears the space. And then, simply a mountain pose and allowing that energy that you are inviting, not the energy that's bombarding you, but whatever it is you're inviting. So doing something like we did at the beginning, pulling prana, or there's another one I love that I didn't have the card up for. Inhale, inhale, exhale, ha, ha. That activates the solar plexus. You can do it seated if there's no arms on your chair, or standing. So inhale, inhale, ha, ha, and invites movement. You can also use the mantra Ram, which empowers the solar plexus, the solar battery of your body. So it's inhale, inhale, ha, ha, inhale, inhale, rum, rum. And then take a moment to simply stand, sense the energy shining in your body. Maybe inhale up through the sole of your left foot to your crown of your head. Exhale down to the right side. And then maybe the body will naturally want to take mountain pose, Tadasana, and standing firm, breathe whatever it is you wish to enhance in your life. That sense of peace, that sense of ease, that sense of well-being through the storms that are bombarding us, that sense of overwhelm. We all are being bombarded right now, and it's really important, I just believe, to clear the space every day and to do it in the morning. And then when things start if you're doing work online and all of a sudden you're seeing the headlines, I would also suggest, as I'm sure you do as therapists, to dose yourself with the news, not to be constantly looking at the news, but simply to stay informed as you feel is relevant to your life, and then to move on to do something after you've watched something that is disturbing to your equilibrium. Then do something to bring yourself back into balance. A 2-minute practice. They're all, if you go to my website, amyweintraub.com, there's links to everything, including I've been leading a daily, and after we finish this, I'll probably go back on Instagram shortly and lead a practice from one of these cards. I'll try not to do something that we've just done on Instagram at the Amy Life Force Yoga Instagram account. So yeah, any other questions, or I could
So
continue?
another question that I'd be curious, and again, I'm always watching if others have questions. We're interested also in outcomes. So I wonder if you have any ideas of where you see trends or specific outcomes for those integrations of mudras or asanas into then other interventions, in a therapeutic environment.
Yes. Well, I would send folks to to PubMed, first of all, to see the research that's out there. We have one of the studies that was done by a Harvard researcher on the Life Force Yoga protocol looks at a reduction in depression and anxiety. Um, that's not specific to integration. One of the studies that used the Life Force Yoga Nidra, which is on my website, though, was specific to psychotherapy. So Yoga Nidra, I haven't said much about it, but it's a wonderful tool for all of us. It's a yogic meditation that you do lying down, and you're led in it. And it begins with a body scan and breath awareness. And then it explores the opposites, a little bit like ACT therapy. In fact, I think ACT, the sort of the Janet Phelps work has been, is looking at how being with what's the constriction and allowing it to be there, and then going to its opposite and breathing into that can actually moderate the constriction, can release it, there's been some really good outcome studies with using the opposites. Yoga Nidra does just that. A full Yoga Nidra explores the opposites of sensation, emotion, and it's been shown to be really effective with trauma. So there is a study that uses the Life Force Yoga for mood management, Yoga Nidra, and it actually showed that the let's see, those, it was a pretty dramatic result. They were given the CD, we still had CDs, we still do for those of us who have old equipment. So the study participants were given the CD, and they could either do the 25-minute practice or the 40-minute practice, and they kept a log, and their therapist taught them, used it in the session first. And those who practiced had, I don't remember the exact results, but a significant decrease in anxiety and depression. So these practices work. So yoga nidra is an excellent practice to integrate, and it's what you're doing if you're using mindfulness techniques, when you use a body scan. And even those of you who practice mindfulness, what the yogic strategies can do is create a portal into mindfulness, because you know that someone who's extremely depressed and with a lot of negative self-talk, if they simply watch the breath, if they're taught only to watch the breath and watch the thoughts, they can spiral into a darker place. So we need it. Mindfulness is wonderful, but we need to build the muscle of mindfulness. And one of the ways to do that is through these very simple seated practices that are in the card deck, and then allow a little wider window of mindfulness, of silence to arise, and led in a session. So that is another way. In terms of outcomes, there are, even the mindfulness community, and several of those folks who are in the mindfulness community have taken the Trish Magyari, who's also an author of one of the studies on trauma and yoga. And so many folks are now meeting the depression or anxiety and then introducing mindfulness, rather than just going straight to the protocol of watching the breath.
So I hear you saying so frequently these themes of sort of a gentle, nonviolent, organic approach, stair-stepping, creating accessibility, allowing things to be simple, building even the yoga muscle within to slowly grow. So just to affirm that it sounds like it's really providing a wonderful access point for so many people.
I hope so. It seems to
So
be.
I may have one more question,
Mhm.
but then no, I'm always watching for other questions. Are there any sort of populations or any groups that you would say this kind of work would not be helpful or is contraindicative?
Um, no, but caveat to that. So folks who have, bipolar with a tendency towards mania, um, and people who may have a predisposition for psychosis, you want to use eyes open, focusing on a point that doesn't move rather than eyes closed. You want to watch the language. In the cards, we don't go to Anamaya Kosha, which is the bliss body so much, but in regular yoga practice, sometimes the cues are to the bliss body, and that may be too much for someone with a predisposition towards mania or any other form of psychosis. So it's just, and in fact, there's a wonderful study that was done at Bronx Psychiatric with folks in a locked ward with a psychiatrist who is also a yoga teacher, and she used pranayama, she used asana, she used simple practices, and the staff loved her because they had to medicate less frequently and use fewer restraints. And the population really responded well in terms of the efficacy of the interventions with yoga. When they practice yoga, it's not that it was a cure to the psychosis, but it made their own moods and their more manageable. They were more self-regulated and basically more content on that psychiatric ward. So,
Thank you, Amy. We
and
have time for one. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just thinking, yeah, these are so adaptable for every population. It's just, going slower, less belly pumping for certain populations. But other than that, especially when you change the language so it's not so much yoga and it's more about simply imagery. I mean, Belarus Napistek did a lot of good studies on imagery for trauma. So using imagery, and one more thing I should say is cueing so that the imagery comes from the client. So cueing to say an image in nature, an image, a time you felt empowered, and making it accessible so that I am not, as the teacher or psychotherapist, giving an image that's it's their image, and it's on the altar of their heart, and it's in the photo album of their lives. It's something they can call upon. An inner sanctuary. It can be used with EMDR and so many other modalities, creating that sense of inner sanctuary. So
I think we have one more question, hopefully a brief one. And thank you all for being here. So I wonder if you could speak to Soham versus Mahara.
Oh, so very calming. That sound very calming. Maha, which means grand and royal in Sanskrit, and the ra is a little more. If you do a ra with ra, ra, which we didn't do with the Maha Ra, it actually pumps the belly. So but it's the sound, which is a closing sound in the Sanskrit alphabet, is very soothing. Mama, ima, ma. So ma, ha, grand but feminine, and ra, which is a more masculine sound. It creates a sense of calm strength, as opposed to so which physiologically actually calms the system.
Beautiful. Thank you, Amy. So on behalf of all of us, we appreciate your time, for being here with us, for your wisdom. And go ahead, please.
Do I have time to thank you, Annie, and Mayu, who set this up so beautifully, and Meru for making this available to so many people. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you all for being here. We hope that you have a lovely day and perhaps find some of these practices to incorporate even into the next few minutes. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.